Welcome. Everyone watching on X, YouTube, thanks for tuning in. I have someone on at least my stream. I know you guys are watching from Dude's stream, probably thinking the same thing, but opposite. We've never streamed before. So finally, I have the pleasure of being here today with Dude, founder of Helios, Stacks, E280, E369, Uranus. Man, I'm losing track here. There's so many things you're building. And you're telling me in the green room you're building even more. So, man, I'm really glad to be streaming with you today. I'm looking forward to talking about what's built on TitanX. And B, tell me about, what's going on with you, what you're working on, what you're excited about within your kingdom, and whatever else on your mind there.
Yeah. First, I think we did, like, you were on the TitanX 1 year anniversary stream. I think we were technically on the same time, maybe at one point there.
Right. Yeah.
But no, this is not. That wasn't really. Can you count that when there's 9 people on a panel?
It's like a toe in the water kind of thing, barely.
Yeah. But I've seen a lot of what you have to say, and like I like your perspectives, and you I feel like you put in thought before you just blurt out something, and I like that. So I'm kind of looking forward to having this discussion, because I think you're, the only other person that I was like, yeah, it'd be really cool to have on here would be Mike Dean, because he's pretty much he has a clear concept of what is built on TitanX in his mind. So it would be cool to get his opinion as well. But it was a late invite. He's not going to be able to make it, but still, I think we'll have a great stream. I'm interested on your opinions for sure.
So, well, and right back at you. So this is going to be a very thought-provoking discussion. I have some interest. I'm sure you have some very interesting thoughts about it. And I want to lay things out like from the ground up and expand and build and kind of see where the nuance in the gray area is, if there is any, that needs to be explored, and maybe how it might change over time too. I think time's a big factor within Ethos, right? Time, stability, maturity, community, those all factor in. So before we go there though, man, what's going on in your world these days? What are you building? What are you working on? What are you excited about?
So Stacks is probably the most exciting. I don't know. We'll just go with that. Stacks is my favorite right now. I'm really loving what that's doing. It's performing beautifully, and we just upgraded it to now we're staking in Ouroboros, which I think the community unanimously really likes as well. So, and I've seen in the Ouroboros chat that they're all cheering on Stacks because we're adding tons of buy pressure.
Nice.
We released, I don't know, it was like 170 billion TitanX or something that's going to buy Stacks. I mean, buy Ouroboros and stake it. Not a bad little chunk there, especially at these prices. It seems like very little, but you know how it goes. When we get another wave, it'll be nice. So we're already earning USDX on that, and we're using that to buy and burn Stacks, and I love it. That's now 6 protocols that we are staking in, and so it's like the whole idea of Stacks was it's the easy button, and it creates consistent staking payouts, because every one of these protocols runs hot, like there's this massive payout and then nothing for months on end, so having a stake in all these other protocols, it's like we're able to get through the bear market of no staking payouts, because like there'll be a massive, like Blaze is paying out in a day and a half or something. Like we'll have that, and then in 30 days we'll have a massive HLX payout, and then in another few days we'll have a hyper payout, and so it smooths it all out. And it's I love it.
And how does it work from the user perspective? I guess this is something, because I've spent some time, listening to you talk about Stacks, but how often do, like, when the protocol generates yield, how often do the users get to see the benefit of that or scrape? And how does that all work? Just so people that are watching that are interested in Stacks.
Yeah, it's got a 9-day cycle on it. So, and we chose that because there's a ton of 8-day payouts across the ecosystem. So we wanted, like, if we set it at 9 days, we're like pretty much guaranteeing we're going to catch an 8-day payout on all these different ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then so every 9 days, like every staking contract is its own contract. So we launched a brand new contract that's specifically for staking in Ouroboros, and then pointed the yield from that to go to the Stacks vault. And then from there, the Stacks vault is now just accumulating. And every one of these individual contracts, they convert all yield into TitanX. And so like Ouroboros, when we earn USDX, we're turning that into TitanX. We're buying TitanX, and then sending the TitanX to the vault. So the vault's earning TitanX, and then or X28. It can receive either of those, and then it converts all TitanX to X28. So we're contributing to the burning of TitanX. Currently, if the ratio is below 1-to-1, though, it will buy off market. So it's smart enough to know, hey, it's 1-to-1 ratio. Well, I'll just mint it, and then it's contributing to the burn. If it's below ratio like it is right now, it'll be like, I get a better deal off market, and it will do that. So it's either burning TitanX or it's helping bring that ratio back to 1-to-1 because it's providing buy pressure on the market when it needs it. So I think that's very powerful.
I think that's yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's the best way possible to do the X28 thing. Because we've seen the peg right now is where are we at with the peg? Are we 83% up? I haven't looked in a while either. But I mean, the more protocols that are doing that, I think the better. So then plus to you're maintaining your economic energy, you're getting more for your money. There's if you happen to buy and the peg goes back up, then now you have even more X28 than you originally had versus TitanX. So it's a win-win-win-win-win, really. So good move on that one.
Yeah, it's working beautifully. And then with the X28, we have a portion that pays out the NFT holders, so they're earning X28. There's a portion that's auto compounding, so we're shipping that back around to reinvest into all these staking protocols. So there's always buy pressure on every one of these tokens we're staking in. So like Ouroboros is going to always have us continuously buying. And we started the stacks off with like 80% compounding, I think. And then every cycle, it slowly scales it back all the way down to like 20%. And then it'll just be a flat 20% forever auto compounding.
Nice.
And then the rest of it goes to the buy and burn. So, and Stacks is built on E280. So when we're taking this X28, we're buying E280 and helping support the volume on E280. And then with that E280, we're buying and burning Stacks. So lots of interconnected, contracts going on there that I think supports, like I said, E280 directly, TitanX indirectly. Or directly, it's burning TitanX. So I think all the way around, it's performing amazing. It's super happy about it.
You kind of have like a tokenomics web instead of like a liquidity web. You're like a tokenomics web where it's like kind of webbing itself through all the protocols and coming back to the core. That's interesting. I like that.
And now that since it can incorporate X28, it's omni-chain capable. Like we can ship X28 to any chain, provide and participate in whatever staking protocol, and take that yield, convert it into X28, and ship it back over to ETH to use to pay our NFT holders and buy and burn stacks and all that stuff. So,
sweet. That's interesting. Well, I'm excited to see where that takes you and Stacks. Yeah. I mean, because you're building already on base. So you got two, because you have an E280 OFT maybe that's not the right way to say it, but you've got Uranus that's over there. You're doing something with E280 as well. And so Stacks could be the third piece to go over to base.
I think the Stacks token, we're just going to leave on ETH. Like,
gotcha. Okay.
all we have to do is just bring that yield back to ETH, so, and like I said, we're working with X28, so we can easily bridge that to whatever chain and bridge it back. So use the X28 to stake in something and then take the earned X28 back without ever having stacks leave Ethereum. So
okay, nice. Just simplifying things, streamlining things, keeping them nice and simple.
yeah, and then we don't have to worry about multiple LPs and how does that work and all that fun stuff. So
right, that gets to be a headache the more you put out there, for sure.
Yes, yeah. With E280, that's like, man, I would say like all of my projects, I'm getting like huge milestones are being hit. So with E280, yeah, we are taking that omni chain. We're doing the same style as TitanX minting to X28. You're taking your element tokens, mint E280. We're burning element, we're buying and burning E280, and then we're also adding to liquidity, which E280 is a liquidity web token, so volume is key. And so the key to volume is liquidity. So having that liquidity allocation is going to always be boosting liquidity, generating more volume, and then keeping that cycle. So, and then having H420, and then James's tokens, the Baby Dragon X and Scale tokens going over there. All of those are going to be paired with E280. So we're basically launching E280 on base and then immediately pairing it with H420, B88, S88. There's Uranus, and then Inferno X is coming very soon. So we're looking at like 5 LPs out the gate pretty much with E280.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that extra arbitrage going on over on base. That's obviously going to feed value back to Element because that's the only way you can mint it, and all that good stuff. And then phase 2 on that is like people migrating their NFTs over to base. That's really what's going to set it off, in my opinion, because you're only going to be able to. So there will be NFTs on base that earn from this tax. But the only way to mint that NFT is by burning your NFT on Ethereum. And so you'll burn your NFT, you'll send it to the contract. The contract will burn the NFT, unlock the element tokens that are backing that NFT, run it through the minter to mint E280, and then bridge that E280 over to base, and then mint a new NFT backed by those newly minted tokens. So we're going to be seeing people burning NFTs, but not unlocking tokens because it's just going to migrate. But it's still going to burn the element and buy and burn E280 because it's running through the minter.
And that's not backwards compatible, right? So when someone goes one way, they can't go back. So those are permanently deflationary.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then imagine that, like when we go to Binance and we go to Arbitrum and we go to Sonic and we go to, imagine that when we're on, a dozen other chains, like you're really going to see the deflationary aspect of like, it's all one-way streets, all of it, starting from Element on Ethereum. So,
and I like what you just said. For all the people that are watching, I want to hear your next thought, but I want to just point out he didn't say if, he said when.
Yes. Yeah.
There's your alpha right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in like worst case scenario, like we don't even need to wait for X28. We can just expand without it if we had to. Like there's like what I'm doing, like this is DeFi, and like I am like all the things that I'm doing, I have full confidence that these will be long-term projects that everything I'm doing, I build with the idea of they can't die. Like Helios has a treasury, we're staking Blaze tokens that are earning ETH. We have staked TitanX. If mining ever comes back on that, we will be earning ETH on that. It's a beneficiary of E280. So part of the E280 tax is paying the HLX treasury. So like even if everybody said, forget Helios, I'm out, I'm selling, I'm leaving, like we don't need users. Like, we have treasuries that are there buying and burning HLX, whether you're there or not. Like,
Right.
and as we keep decentralizing it and spreading out our treasuries, because, you know, and we have Giannis and we have Wonderland, which is on Pulse. You know, like, we just have Helios has its fingers and everything and is always expanding. So it's like the zombie protocol, you can't kill it. So, and that's, you know, again, E280, you know, there's locked liquidity. There's always going to be arbitrage. It's not a matter of if, but how much, you know, and even at these lows with TitanX, like, there's still some volume coming through and there's still E280 getting burned. NFT holders are getting rewarded, and that's forever. And as we expand to more chains and add more LPs, it's only going to grow. And, like, again, everybody could leave, and it's like, our bots, they're not going anywhere. Like, this is something that's very sustainable.
I like how you're building stuff for the long term. It's kind of like a lot of them are, you know, they have the ability to, you know, if they get adoption, they can really start cooking with gas. And simultaneously, you know, if they don't get a ton of adoption initially out of the gate, there's still like a slow cooker in the background that doesn't care about what you feel about it, doesn't care what you think. It's still, like you said, you got your treasuries, got the R bots, got all these different factors playing into the slow growth over time that is going to act like a snowball, you know, and keep building, keep pulling in funds, keep pulling in tokens, build the treasuries, build the vaults, and they're going to become much, much, much bigger autonomously or with adoption, which, I mean, one way or another should force adoption at some point, because when it gets to a point where the snowball's too big and you can't ignore it, now everyone's going to at least be looking at it, and you're going to look at participation, right? I think that's really important for the longevity of this ecosystem as well. And I would even segue, if we could, into, so when you're building all this, how are you thinking about build on TitanX for your vision? How does it align? And what is your understanding of the ethos that you utilize when you're conceptualizing all these protocols now and into the future?
I would say, like, my very initial thought is bonded liquidity. Like, that's when I think of TitanX, that's what I think of. That rising tide lifts all ships. You know, I always think of, like, you know, Eric going out there and promoting DragonX. Like, it's a friendly competition. You know, like, he's got stake TitanX and so does HLX, and, like, it's a competition between us, but we're both supporting each other. And that's what I really like to see, is, like, if DragonX did a 10x, the only way it would do that is if people were buying TitanX up to get into DragonX. And when they buy up all that TitanX to get in DragonX, that pumps Helios. Like, the bonded liquidity is massive. It's massive. And no, like, everybody cheers that on when we have green candles, and the whole ecosystem is green. You know, you go to TitanX Hub and it's like green all the way down the board, and everyone's like, this is amazing. But the second you get a red candle, everyone's like, oh no, we need ETH pairs. You know, this is bad. We got one LP and nobody can exit because it has to go through this. And it's like, everyone was cheering it on when all the ETH had to go to buy TitanX, but the second you have to sell it, it's a failed, you know, concept. And it's like, you have to take one with the other. You have to. Now, I think now that we've seen several things come up, it's like, you know, there is nuances to it, and I'm not completely against having an ETH pair, but it makes things complex. But like, initially, like, when I first found TitanX, and what I really liked about it was the bonded liquidity. And even though I have nothing to do with Taurus or Blaze or whatever, like, you're supporting TitanX, so you're indirectly supporting me and my projects because I'm built on TitanX. To me, like, there's so much toxicity in crypto that, like, this ethos forces, you know, us to work together. And even if you're not working together, you're still supporting everybody. Like, that that to me is what the concept of what build on TitanX is that you're supporting everybody in the ecosystem. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how does that specifically look? That now we can kind of dive into the details on how that could go right or wrong. By yeah.
Well, I wanted to bring up this tweet because I'm really in alignment with what you're saying. I think what you're pointing to is build on TitanX has to do more with aligning incentive structure. I think than most people are thinking about it. It's liquidity, but like you were saying, when someone comes and builds something, or multiple people come and build some things that are competitive, but route through the same core, if they're all bringing in demand, everyone benefits from it. And at the end of the day, right? Like there's a net positive around the table. So I think, and to put it in Jake's exact words here, I found this tweet from him from October 11th, where he's saying basically input token TitanX, burn stake or lock TitanX, pair an LP with TitanX. Really, he's saying it's that simple. No parasites, symbiotic, not cannibalistic. Be careful. So based on this and based on where we are now and what you've already said, because you kind of alluded to this as well with the nuance and the gray area, what qualifies as nuance and gray area within what looks like from this as possibly very definitive terms?
I mean, the LP side of things. Like, if you stick to what Jake's talking about on this post, like that's like the easy formula. Like, if you follow this formula, you're guaranteed supporting TitanX. There's no questions about it. But then, like, if you want to push the envelope, like, I think there are ways to be building on TitanX and supporting the ecosystem that don't necessarily follow these rules. And I think the biggest glaring thing is pairing with tokens outside the ecosystem. Pair with ETH. That can it can be good or bad. Like, if
Can
you're
you define real quick? Can you define how it's, just to make it super clear, when it's good and when it's bad?
yeah, like having a pair with TitanX and a pair with ETH, and let's just say 50-50. It is good if you are getting 100% of your adoption from outside of the TitanX community. If you go find brand new people, not a single one of them have ever touched TitanX, they're showing up with ETH, they're buying your token, and then arbitrage will create buys with that ETH. As they push up the price on the ETH pair, there's going to be discrepancies, and our bots will take ETH, buy TitanX to equalize the price. And now you're getting buys on the TitanX ETH pair. That's good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you do the exact same setup, 50-50 ETH and TitanX, and then you market to only the TitanX community, all those people are showing up with TitanX. They're going to buy your token directly, but then the arbitrage is going to be selling TitanX to equalize that price. And so you've got the exact same setup, but one way you're getting all buys and another way you're getting all sells.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's where it gets into being a touchy subject, as far as like how do you even like it like for me, like if I were to launch a project, I already have a following in TitanX, so I have to assume that some of those participants are going to be TitanX ecosystem people. Like, I don't even think I could launch a protocol and TitanX people not hear about it. Like, even if
Right.
I was like, I'm not marketing to any of you guys, I'm going over here to this other place, they're still gonna find me, and maybe that's okay if only 10% are from TitanX and 90% is from other areas. But then again, like, how do you like, it's a gray area because it's not cut and dry, and you can't guarantee that you're bringing in fresh ETH as opposed to TitanX.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, and on that note too, it's difficult because if you want to go down that rabbit hole, it's a slippery slope, right? It's like,
Yeah.
if people are in the TitanX ecosystem and they hear about something and TitanX is doing bad and they go into this other thing, they're still going to sell down the price. So it's like, I think it's a challenge because it's one thing when someone directly goes after the TitanX community and is like, hey, we're building over here, because then it's tough. I find it actually so difficult because on one hand, it's like we don't want that to happen, right? We don't, as a community, we don't, because it hurts the price. And also, if someone's building something that people get excited about over there, it's like, it is what it is. If someone's going to go ahead and build the same, and the same thing could be said for us. Like if we're building stuff that's taking away from other ecosystems, I mean, the same argument could be made at us if we're trying to go to other communities. So it's like, I feel like there's a hard balance between understanding that this is part of the game and also using it to our advantage and working with it. Because if we're gonna try and expand to other communities, we could be looked at in the exact same way as we're looking at other communities or other sub tokens kind of coming to us that have built a community and marketing to us because we have the same kind of values. So how do you, if we're taking that, how do you work with a framework like that then kind of going into the future? I mean, maybe one thing you could add in is time, because I assume if with ETH in the beginning, if let's go ahead and assume that wrap BTC and ETH were the two main major influencers in the beginning of ETH, and people started pairing and building on, or pairing with wrap BTC mainly, but their tokens were built on ETH, and it had a similar setup to what we have now with TitanX. I wonder if that would have a negative effect then versus that same kind of stuff were to happen when it's much more mature in the future. There's less likelihood to happen. So part of the ethos to me feels like it's kind of like having training wheels on versus having a border wall and guys on the, what do they call it? Like literally armed guardsmen, marching along and making sure no one gets in or out unless they have permissions. It really feels more like a time thing where as we mature more, we don't need that as much, because right now we're in our infancy stage. We're still expanding. We're still building the community. We're still finding that maturation process, even systemically, of TitanX. Like it's still early in its phase of its mining process. It's 2000. We're still 1,500 days away from TitanX getting to a point where now you can't mine past a certain amount of tokens. It's going to be extremely, extremely difficult. So my question to you, I think I posed a bunch in that. And feel free to comment on anything in there that you want, but I would pose a specific question of, how big of a factor does time really play into this whole ethos? And at what point do we start to merge the nuance of time into this whole ethos?
That's so tough to answer. But like I feel like if any token, like again, you got 50% TitanX, 50% ETH. Like I think in the long run, that is supporting TitanX. That they still, even though a bunch of people technically sold TitanX to get into this project, it's still locking up TitanX in that LP. Like it, like if they didn't exist, where would that TitanX be? It would still be in users' hands, or they would have sold into the ETH pair or whatever. I don't know, but like I'm just imagining if you had 1,000 tokens that all launched that were half in ETH and half in TitanX, I think I would be okay with that. Like, are they built on TitanX? That's a different question. But for the health of TitanX, I would love to see 1,000 LPs holding TitanX in that LP. Like that's locking up. I mean, it's not locked, but it's in use in an LP somewhere. Like that's one it's not in the TitanX ETH LP, which is where we don't want TitanX, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
uh, but like, yeah, is that bad? Like, I mean, it probably would be bad up front because you've got, you know, if again, it's where is the community coming from? If it's all the people in TitanX going into these 1,000 tokens, yeah, there's going to be a lot of pain with the arbitrage. But in the long run, I don't know. It might be more beneficial because you've got 1,000 tokens out there that are all utilizing it. And but again, it's very gray. And I think that's where I'm realizing, like, if you stick to what Jake's tweet is here on the screen, there's no gray area. You are 100% without a doubt a build on TitanX. It's impossible for you to be a vampire of any sort.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's not like, does that stifle adoption? You know, like, we want to stop people from putting one foot in and one foot out? Do we want to stop people from creating a TitanX pair? I think, you know, probably it would be better to just educate users that, hey, this isn't a build on TitanX project. Yeah, we see they have a TitanX LP, but just, you know, have awareness that if you're going to use TitanX to participate in that, you're actually hurting the price of TitanX.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something like that would be more helpful.
But then even with that too, it's like if you're opening the door to, I guess it's hard to say because we haven't ever seen long-term benefits. We haven't seen long-term scenarios play out longer than like a week or two to
Yeah.
see what happens. And we don't know what happens on a conversion rate of like, where would people have gone with those funds,
Mm-hmm.
right? If they made a bunch of funds and the founders are educating about TitanX in the meantime, and they're teaching them a whole bunch of valuable stuff, where would they take the funds after that? Like, is it temporary loss for long-term gain, and is it also certain? Obviously, it's the context of who the founders are, what their motives are as well. So it gets grayer and grayer and grayer as you kind of step into that realm. So I think there is something to be said for, like, I think I see massive benefit to the rigidity of
Mm-hmm.
input token, burn stake lock, parrot, all that, TitanX, or it's not. Like, if we look at this from like a pros versus cons kind of thing, it's not confusing, right? It's is or is not, right? It's if this, then that, if not this, then that, right? And I think from a communication standpoint and for a community standpoint, it's really easy to rally around that.
Yeah.
And the problem I can see happening is when you have a combination of differing opinions, different levels of understanding, um, and all the factors that go into, just communicating as a community, you get the potential to be divisive. Now, the only thing I can say with that is, um, you also run the risk of doing the very same thing by having black and white rules where someone flat out doesn't agree, and then you have a schism that happens. I mean, we've seen that at least once already happen in the ecosystem, and people went that way. And I haven't seen too much about it since, but you see what I'm saying? It's like you can't really win. I mean, even if you look at something like you can think of a like TitanX and is like it is an L1 and L1, but we have the unfortunate um I'll use the word unfortunate only in the context of how it relates to blockchain specifically, like the layer one, the gas token. It's much harder to, like, let's look at Pulse Chain, for example, right? Pulse Chain has the most ETH. It's bonded to ETH, but most pairs, because there's not as much ETH on Pulse Chain specifically, because it's bridging and all that, it's disconnected in a sense, right? You have this, you have a lot less users that are likely and able to utilize ETH on Pulse Chain for their own protocol. So everything's kind of built on Pulse Chain, right? So it's very similar to TitanX, but it doesn't have the ease of access to liquidity with another chain or another token with its own value proposition. So how do you, I don't know. I really don't know how you battle all of this really, other than just keeping it simple for temporary purposes and then slowly over time allowing the natural evolution to take place as stability takes place. But I see a lot of it's hard. I don't think this is an easy conversation to have and to come up with anything that's like everything checks all the boxes.
Yeah. Well, except for like we were saying, like if you follow those 3 steps on a tweet, then you do check the boxes and you are guaranteed to be beneficial to the ecosystem. But yeah, we've seen already that lots of people don't fit into those boxes and still want to do things. And I think it's more of a matter of just raising awareness to the community to just not necessarily shun projects, but just be, hey, just so you know, you're aware that they technically only have 1 foot in the door. So like they're not fully supporting us. And then I was going to ask you, like, what is that timing? You're saying like over the long run, this could be beneficial to have these projects, but like up front, it's not so beneficial because we're trying to, get our start. Like, when is that time? When is it okay to start accepting these types of things? Like, are we there yet?
Oh man, it's a really hard question. I'm sorry I posed that to you because now I'm saying it's like that's a really, really hard question. But at the same time too, it's like, okay, well, if we actually follow that, okay, when is maturity? Well, let's compare, like, is there a specific user metric that we can go to? Like how many, like I would say something like Pulse Chain, even though it's seen a lot of up and a lot of down and all consolidates to sideways, there's a level of stability that's kind of there in sentiment, in it hasn't really moved yet, hasn't done its thing yet. Everyone's aware of it, but the user base is there, right? So when new projects come along, people play with it. And there's a level of rallying around the entirety of the core of Pulse Chain. And then you have the people that trickle out as well. So there's like, you have the user base, you have the overall sentiment, and I think you also have economic total TVL, we'll call it, within the chain as well. And I think if we compared to where we are now in TitanX, we're quite still in the infancy phase before that. I don't know if that's like a benchmark we could call it, if that's above or below what I would call stable. But if we look to something like that as a form of benchmark, I would say that we are not there yet in terms of out of that infancy stage. Like we're still, like, if you look on X, I mean, I'll just speak from my own experience. I look on X to see the posting, and when I make a post about Pulse Chain, which I don't do as much nowadays because I'm really focused on this ecosystem. But when I do make posts about this ecosystem, I notice the engagement is very, very, very different, which shows the community is much, much, much smaller, right? At least actively on X, right? So in terms of time, it could be 6 months from now. It could be 2 years from now. But I think it comes down to time is secondary to when adoption, the community, and TVL is all present, right? But time is needed to get there, but you can't predict how much time it's going to take to get there. So I guess it's the best thing I can answer on that front.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that we're not there yet. And it's really hard to speculate when would we get there. And that's why, like, for me personally, like I follow the rules, like I don't want to be in that gray area with anything I'm doing. And I really do focus on supporting the ecosystem, and there's no doubt in what I'm doing does that. But I'm not against people pushing the limits, and fuck around and find out. Like,
yeah. Well, and if someone's going to go and do something and try something out, and they realize what they thought, what their intentions were, and what they were doing in the end were slightly off, and they do corrective course action. And, you know, sure, it was a learning experience. There was some sell pressure or whatever you could call it, harm, if you want to be dramatic about it, at least in my opinion. You know, I still think, you know, we don't need to, and this is just a personal note, but to take a scenario that happened and now put criminal, bad guy, villain on somebody instantaneously. I think, you know, if someone like when someone shows you who they are, believe them. But oftentimes, you know, you need a couple times of instances to really know who somebody is through and through. And so I would just be cautionary about over demonizing people that do, you know, try to push that boundary
Mm-hmm.
and to see if there's gain there, to try and do something different, and then make corrective action afterwards and apologize and, you know, say, okay, you know, we learned, we're gonna do things from here on out the right way. I would just personally be careful about that. But what do you think about people that do try and push the envelope, and then how we should approach people that do that afterwards? Maybe if something comes where, you know, Jake's got to step in and say, I don't agree with this, we shouldn't do this, right? And that's his take on it, of course. But if you see something like that happening, what's your approach?
I mean, he's said it himself too, that this is DeFi and you can do whatever the hell you want. You know, it's more of like community awareness and like, yeah, like people can do what they want and experiment and hit all those gray areas, but we just need a community that understands that they are in that gray area, and they like, you know, education. It sounds silly, but like that, I think that's the best course of action, is to just educate users on like, if you aren't sure, you know, like you can go to TitanX Hub and you can be sure that everything listed there is supporting TitanX, you know, but you know, that doesn't mean that's the exhaustive list, right? There's other projects out there that have TitanX LPs and they're not on that. And I think they do support, but it's in the gray area, you know, and as long as people understand that and can tread lightly, you know, because if you're a TitanX maxi and you're all in on TitanX, and then maybe you shouldn't go into these gray areas because you are effectively selling your TitanX, you know, and you are hurting your own bags. But yeah, really, like those gray area projects can also be really strong at bringing in outside community into it, and they are getting into a project not knowing what TitanX is, and then, you know, digging deeper and being like, oh, what is this TitanX pair, and then what is TitanX, and following that, and then going, oh, this is cool, and hey, what is Taurus? Yeah, let me check that out. And now you're bringing in people into the ecosystem from being in that gray area, and you've converted someone into a TitanX user. Like, to me, that's a positive thing, but it's still absolutely in a gray area. And I don't know that as a community we'll ever agree on what's the line on acceptable and it's not, you know, because I'll point out even DragonX has a pair with ETH, you know, and I think that's very acceptable to the community. It's very small. It's like 3% or something, you know, and I can understand from a point of view of like a lot of these websites like Deck Screener or like Moralis. Like I tried to get something listed on Moralis, and they said you have to have an ETH or an USD pair for us to show your price properly. And I was like, well, shit, like I don't have that, and so I couldn't get listed on that. And so like there is some things like the buy bots, you know, like there's lots of things out there that get confused when there's not an ETH pair. And so just having a tiny little pair with ETH can help fix a lot of those problems.
Well, even I remember Mike, I was having a conversation with Mike, And he was telling me that the same thing of like, CowSwap doesn't register certain pairs built on TitanX unless it has an ETH pair.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, it's like in order to actually make the system work properly, like really, really well, you need to like slightly obscure the line to allow for like small, but then it's like if it organically grows on its own, then like what do you like? You kind of open that door, and whatever happens after that, like you said perfectly, it's like it's DeFi, right? So I think the one thing you hit on nail on the head though with like really, really, really well is like the education and leaving people up to their own devices. I think if you give people the tools and the education and the understanding of the who, what, where, why, when, and how of everything to make their own decisions, I think you actually empower the community as well, because then you don't leave room for divisiveness over uncertainty and lack of knowledge. You have people that can see, okay, I don't agree, but I understand why they're saying what they're saying. I'm going to go this way instead of just being like, you're wrong. Right. And then you have this split, which I mean, welcome to crypto. It's kind of the nature of the beast. I doubt this is ever going to have any realistic implications. Obviously it's a pipe dream, but I think if we can try, there's an impact to be made. And even if it's 0.1% better, dude, bring it on.
Yeah. 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 It really, yeah, there's like, this is something that's not going to go away. This is something that's going to keep coming up. And maybe as we keep, maybe the community is learning, they're seeing, oh, well, there was this project or there's that project that seemed good, but wasn't because of this. Like maybe as we keep going, we are learning, but there's still going to be, times where it is vampiring the ecosystem. But like you said, maybe that's short term, that is bad for sure, but maybe long term it's not bad. We still haven't even gone down that road to see what that even looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So
And it's like, do we shut down all opportunity to learn, to possibly see what's down there, or do we give it a chance? And it's like, it's hard to communicate what's right there at all. I don't see at this point, because of the way the community seems to be right now. Everyone's looking for and trying to understand what the solution is, because we're in a very uncertain time. No one knows. Everyone's like, is the V1 ever going to get turned on again? Is Jake ever coming back? Are we all going? Is it all going to zero? Like what's going on here, right? And it's funny. This is a very important time to have this conversation. It's also the funniest time to have the conversation, because I feel like this is the least likely time when people are actually going to listen to it and learn from it and carry it into the future, because everyone's like, no, I know I have to, I'm panicking because my bags are going down. And fair enough, so I wonder if it'd be cool to see how this conversation expands over time, like not just to have this conversation one and done and then just like leave it, but have this as like an ongoing discussion amongst probably the people who are, I don't want to say, the only reason I'm going to say this for all you watching is not that you who are not building anything do not know. There are many of you who are very, very, very smart, but generally speaking, some of the people that have proven that they have, the widest perspective, deepest understandings happen to be the people that are building. So I would say typically, this will probably be a conversation that we'll look to with other builders in the space who are contributing and have the experience to know like what's happening there, and to see over time, based on builders' knowledge, what's going on. I think that's going to be probably the core piece to this, is really like who's leading the conversations,
Yes. It's always gonna be a gray area. If you don't follow this tweet, you're in gray area forever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
100%. But in my opinion, I think there's a lot of stuff that could be out there that is in the gray area that is very beneficial, and I would welcome. But we're still in our infancy, like you're saying, and I personally, like I said, am also going to be very careful about what I'm doing as we were trying to build this ecosystem. And I want to make absolutely sure that everything I'm doing is supporting it, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So for me, like I'm not creating anything outside of there. Although I will say, like, you do need, we've seen that you do need a tiny little ETH pair just to fix all the apps out there in crypto to read your tokens correctly. Um, you know, like we had that issue with Uranus. Like, you know, you go to swap ETH for Uranus and it would say on the website, no liquidity. And we're like, it's literally right there, like buy X28, then buy it. Like, but it would not do it. Would
Mm-hmm.
not do it. So we had to educate people, you know, okay, like we got to walk people through that don't know what X28 is, you know, like you need to buy this token first, and then you need to go, and then you can buy this token. And that gets convoluted really quickly, and you can lose a lot of new users from that. And so we quickly were like, we need some kind of ETH pair, and we made that. And like a lot of the routing it's less confused, and um, it's like it's not what I wanted. It wasn't the intention, but that's what we decided to make this work. We needed that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just like to be listed on Morales, you have to have that. Like, so, but again, what is the line? You know, it has to be tiny, you know, like I said, DragonX, it's like 3% or something. It's 97% is bonded with TitanX. Like that's very strong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same with Uranus. It's very small, but already right there, we're going into gray areas, but in survival mode. Like it's not like I wanted to push the limits. It was more so like I'm trying to make this project work, and so we had to do that. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I'm doing very little to stray outside of that. I'm gonna let other people figure that out for us and take that heat. I don't know.
Yep. I'm with you. Well, and this is what we're up against here, which is music, not rumors. Just follow the ethos guys. We didn't have this conversation, or else we will call you a parasite. It's like it's it's fair enough to everyone, each their own
Yeah.
on that front. This discussion, hey, if this discussion bothers you, you don't have to watch it. I'd recommend turning off because this is my first time actually getting to really speak with dude. But from what I gathered, he's similar to myself and very open-minded, looking for the nuance and trying to expand, understand deeper. And black and white seems, at least to myself, very hard to stick to when you understand the nuance of the situation and you see the benefit of the nuance and understanding the nuance, and it's good to talk about it. So I don't want to speak on your behalf, but it seems like that's where your head's at with this. And that's why I love this conversation. I appreciate you coming on and having this with me as well.
Yeah, we are just having a conversation. We are just discussing and trying to figure out what is, what isn't. Like, we're not here to say what's right and wrong. We're trying to have the discussion and how do we come to those conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's more of a philosophical conversation than like,
yeah,
here's what you guys need to do.
yeah, yeah. So if you're getting upset at this conversation, then you're not being open at all. Like, yeah, because I mean, what if we did come to find out that there is a way to be in this gray area and always be supporting the ecosystem? Then yeah, we're figuring that out. But we couldn't figure that out if we didn't have the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And you couldn't have said it better. Why stick to black and white when we can have rainbows? So, and to be fair with music, not rumors, I know that you're not saying we can't, and I appreciate you saying this is a known issue. The ethos is known from day one. And I want to point out here, we are having this conversation, all of us together, because we're all in this, but Dude and I are having this dialogue here with you guys. But yet, if you go and look specifically to how we're building, we are literally doing exactly the thing that's black and white. We're not in the gray area, but what we're doing is discussing the possibility of like when, how, what does it look like, because the future is going to change. And if we are of this ethos and we're not up at the times, we're not anticipating things, we're not thinking ahead, you know, we could get sideswiped. We can run into all sorts of issues if we're not looking to what the future could be like, preparing, being able to adapt and grow in ways that actually benefit us when the time is right for those things to really come into consideration. So, yeah, before anyone goes and says, "Oh, you guys are talking like parasites," we may be talking to you like parasites, if you want to look at it like that, but we're building exactly the opposite. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. It's yeah. You said it right. I can't add anything to that.
okay, easy. And I think we've covered like a lot of the ethos stuff, man. I feel like
Yeah.
there's only so much we can really say on that front. I'd be curious.
Because like
When,
even input token TitanX, like, well, we're already straying from that. You know, we're taking TitanX or ETH.
yeah,
Like,
right. Oh, there's X28 now too, right?
yeah.
There's X20. You have other kingdom tokens where you can potentially take in other tokens from the ecosystem.
Yep. Yep.
So,
I think the key there is that if it's not TitanX or X28, that other token is either already in the ecosystem, or if it's outside like ETH or USDC or something, that 100% of that has to go to buy TitanX or X28. That's, if you're doing that, then you're staying in that black and white line. But if only half of that ETH goes to buy TitanX and the other half goes somewhere else to your LP outside of it, now you're back in that gray area. So yeah, I really like this, and we should definitely expand this and bring in other people. And like, I'd love to hear people's thoughts on it, other people's like contrarian views to it. And yeah, I don't want to stifle adoption and innovation. And you know, if someone's thinking about including TitanX token in their project and they're in a gray area, like, we shouldn't just be shutting them down. We should be looking at, how does this help us? You know, how do we tread carefully to make sure we're not hurting ourselves? But I mean, and if we decide, you know what, this is a vampire attack, well, then if you're in TitanX, then don't participate. But if you're not in TitanX and they're participating, then they're supporting us. Again, that's like, where is the economic energy coming from? If it's coming from outside the ecosystem, then it is okay. And then we're back to just education. Hey, you're already in the ecosystem. You don't want to touch these gray area projects. That's going to hurt us. You're already here, you know. But oh, you're not in the ecosystem? Yeah, check all the gray area projects out. Just dip your toes, you know. Like, you're only, this token's only halfway with TitanX and the other half's with ETH. Like, but they're coming from outside. They're bringing in fresh capital, and half of that's going to TitanX. Yeah, I will welcome them with open arms. So,
well, especially if they're talking in the chats and they're educating, and that capital inflow comes like you said, from outside. So it's like, it's new value coming in, which is critical, obviously, but then that new value is coming in with the potential to come in with even more, because there's education paired with that. And people are like, oh, I came for the memes and I stayed for I stayed for Stacks, and I stayed for Taurus, and I stayed for all these other protocols that, are much more than a meme. They're stable and they bring a lot of value long term. There's a lot of value in that as well. And at the same time, then it's like, okay, then we, as people that are on the forefront of the community, at least whether you're on X or you're a streamer or you're a builder or whatever, there's who gets to make those decisions then? And it gets, we get back into the weeds again of like, all right, and we're back. So
yeah,
it's tricky.
And
you still there? Did we lose you?
Yeah, just for a second. Oh man, well, that totally threw my thought off. Yeah, you cut out at the end there, and I had a thought, and then disconnected, just totally.
Well, let me branch that out. Say, okay, let's expand this conversation instead of like build. Right now we're thinking about build on TitanX in the core, right? We're talking about like, okay, how do we keep the core safe? How do we keep the users of the core and everything on top of it safe? But now we have this opposing piece that we're now starting to talk about, which is expanding the community, bringing new value in. Okay, so now we know that we've established that protocols that are, utilizing and marketed to the community that might have some sort of marketing approach that it brings in TitanX or educates on TitanX, but brings TitanX value out. How else? What are some other ways of bringing in value, connecting to other communities? Really bringing value into the ecosystem because they feel like it's worth bringing their value into, and they can see that. So how do we, other than that specific way of allowing those types of projects to come along and giving them small, medium, large support in some way, shape, or form, where do we go from here in terms of bringing value and community building, community expansion, I should say, as well?
That's a tough question. I don't know. Like,
because what have you been running into? Because you're expanding the base. Like we've all been here on TitanX, that's its own thing. But expanding the base, I'm sure you've learned a ton. You've seen a lot there. You've come to understand, what it's like to go beyond this ecosystem now and really push into something new. So, what have you learned from that you see as the challenges, but also the opportunities we can overcome to build into new communities? And how hard do you think that's going to be? What's it going to take to do that kind of thing?
It's like starting all over again, because I'm trying to like make a name for myself on base to base users that, like if I'm trying to market to outside of the ecosystem, it's like starting all over again. And I have to, make connections with influencers on base chain and all those things. And it's tough sledding, whereas it's like, with stacks, it's like this is a TitanX project. It's built on E280. Like I immediately have TitanX community, the E280 community. Like I have immediate following and all those things. Like, and then it's like, no, we're going to base and we're going to find new people. It's like base doesn't know who dude is.
Right.
So it's tough. But this is where we really need to persevere. And I think we can make a name for ourselves on base. And then I think it'll be easier when we go to Binance and try to make a name for ourselves there. We can point to like, hey, we've already done this on 2 other chains. Like, it's like right now, this is the first time we've expanded to another chain. And it's like, how do we actually make this work? How do we really make this successful? And I think once we figure that out and then we go to another chain, it's like we'll have that formula. Like, all right, this is what worked on base. Like now we can hit the ground running on Binance on exactly how to do this to make this work. And then the next chain and the next chain, all of those will be easier, I think, because we'll have these formulas figured out, and we'll have a better idea of that gray area too, and like what's more acceptable and what's not. But yeah, I think there's always going to be opinions. When you're in a gray area, there's always it's more opinion than black and white. So
well, yeah, exactly. Well, and I honestly, I can attest that because, building both Unity and Taurus, I've found pretty much the same thing, where you kind of have to start from ground zero. And it's even, I did build a name for myself on Pulse Chain at a time, I should say, because I feel like now I've come over here and people are not so interested in my opinion anymore, which I couldn't be bothered about other than the fact that it's like, man, could really use that old reputation, but it is a real big challenge. But I also see it as a massive benefit, and there's different ways to potentially go about it. Like the way I'm doing it, I've disconnected the protocols from one another. But what I have found is when people find out about something they like that's on one chain and they find out that it's also somewhere else, I think there's an opportunity to potentially bring in new users because they're like, oh, this is here and here. Oh, okay. And then if they like it, then they're going to tell people. Then you can, it's trade-offs, right? Like I think at least this is the way I'm approaching it personally is, yes, you could get a split where some people are like, well, I might just go to Pulse Chain or I might just go to ETH. But honestly, the amount of people that I've heard that have, you get excited because it's coming to the chain they like. They realize it's coming somewhere else, and they're like, and I have a lot of people I want to talk to about this. This is really cool. And then now it's like, okay, right now you are giving everyone what they want and bringing the opportunity in for more adoption because you have the same systems on different chains.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it doesn't change how difficult it is in getting that out there. And I don't know, I haven't heard of anyone that really has come up with, any real solutions. Cause I don't know if you've been in how many spaces you've been in or how much you've been like in contact with other people, but it's hard to find the right spaces to get into. It's hard to get people to respond, when they don't know who you are, or they get the idea you're trying to talk to them about something, that you've built. So,
or they want money.
or they want money to talk about it. Exactly. That's very common now in this space. So what else do you do? Is it just the slow grind, or like the inevitable, unfortunate slow grind, or, do we have to take other types of actions to make it happen?
I think it is the slow grind. And my take on it, like the direction I'm going is I'm trying to build like standalone protocols that can attract people, whether you're in TitanX or not. Like you don't even need to know what it is or anything like that. Like build a protocol that interests people, and by using it, they are indirectly supporting TitanX in the background, but still, like doing that, like you still have to market to those people, and you're still fighting that uphill battle. So either way, it is that battle. I already did it once, like I came from nothing, I'm just dude, that showed up on TitanX and launched Helios and developed a following, and then, launched other projects, and then started making connections and doing collaborations, like, with Utah on Stacks, and like collaborating with James on Uranus, and like I'm building, like that's success to me, and so I've done it once. I think I can do it again. I can go to base and like start building connections, and making a name for myself, and being successful on there, and then going from base to Binance. It should be easier theoretically, because I'm going to have more and more of a following, because there's going to be some overlap where they're like, yeah, I'm on base and Binance, so I know this guy, and like he's building on Binance, I want to participate in that, and or they're on ETH too, that type of thing. But it is perseverance, and now more than ever, if you're looking at just the chart, you've got to be worried. I'm way less worried because I'm not here. The chart obviously affects me, but like I have a clear vision on what I'm doing, and I am working for my bags, like I am supporting TitanX and everything I'm doing. Like I am not just sitting there idle saying, can devs do something? Like I'm actually deving and doing something. So it's a lot easier for me to sit comfy in this bear market, knowing that like it's not just me. There's other people like you that are contributing and are building and aren't scared to continue to launch on TitanX. Flare is launching in like 5 days or something. Smooth and Crypto he's out there. Other people are still launching. We're still marching forward. Like it's a scary time as if you're just on the sidelines, or like you're not your only source of information is from streams, and then key players are not there to hold your hand and say it's going to be all right, we're still building. Like, I can understand where that FUD's coming from, but I don't feel it because I know I'm there doing it myself.
Mm-hmm.
But still, like, that's again where I'm like, we part of being mature is going past looking at one guy to save us all, you know, and like, this is DeFi, and we have over a dozen builders in this ecosystem. Like, we need to start looking at those dozen people as the roadmap and not just one individual. Obviously, the leader does matter and it does help, but the more we can mature and spread out and have all these builders doing their own things, even if they are in gray areas, like, the expansion of TitanX ecosystem, I think will be healthy in the long run and ensure we make it through these 4-year cycles. All that, like, but again, going back to me, I feel confident because I've got a ton on my plate and I am still building. I am launching so much more, and I am directly supporting all of my projects, and they are in that black and white category of supporting TitanX. So
Mm-hmm.
I can feel certain that what I'm doing is right for the ecosystem, and we're all gonna make it. Yeah.
Yep, I'm in the same boat as you though. It's funny. I remember, and I'm sure you remember this too. There was a certain time when, and I do feel really fortunate. You know, it's a trade off because uh, with being a builder, with doing all this, you feel like you're in control, like you're saying. And I couldn't have said it any better than how you've said it, where it's just like you feel like we were able to work so tremendously for your own bags that, you know, when you build something and you believe in it, that like it can have such a huge impact that it gives you that that wind in your sail, that ease, that you're a little less stressed than if you're sitting there and you've got nothing except for your X retweet and comment button, uh, you know, to do your work for you, right? Or you don't have an audience, and so it's hard to build an audience. Like, I definitely remember back to pre-building, and it's hard. It's hard when you feel like you are, you know, helpless in that sense, where everyone else is really in control of what happens next far more than you ever will be. And so I can really empathize with that. And I think, you know, if you're in that situation, um, I would really consider that, you know, dude's built God knows how many protocols now, has how many in the works. I'm still building. You got Flare still building. Mizuchi is still building. You've got people that are still building on this ecosystem, including Jake, you know? And so that, at least to me, is an indicator that maybe the time isn't right for some of these guys to come out and outright push, because maybe they believe that there's a bit of timing involved, right? And why fight a vacuum when you can wait till the vacuum's no longer there anymore? Um, and so that I would say, you know, just be mindful of that. And you speaking of, you lost your train of thought. I just lost my train of thought, and because I lost my train of thought, I'm going to ask you, you know, how do you see the recovery going for TitanX? Like, to me, honestly, if this isn't the bottom, we are so close, because like I think we touched on off screen, there's a certain ratio to a certain fund that I'll let you bring up, that, you know, where all of a sudden it's pretty much the absolute bottom. So, you know, at what point here and how do we really start to see this ecosystem recover, um, like we know it will?
I think for me, I just avoid that, and I just push forward, knowing that it's not if but when.
Right.
Like, when you eliminate the question of if, like, is this a failed project or not? No, it's not. This is not going to zero. Like, then at that point, when you make that decision, then you know, okay, it is going to reverse and we will have another wave, and we're gonna, all the things, all the fundamentals are still there. When you realize that, then it's just a matter of, like, are you over invested? You know, because that makes a lot of people nervous. They need to take profit so they can pay their bills. Like, that's not how you do it, you know. But, like, when you eliminate the if and you just have a win, then to me it's like, well, like, it'll happen. It'll happen.
Mhm.
I think this year, I think this is going to be a really good year for us. The wider market is still there. There's still lots of bullish fundamentals in the entire crypto space, and within TitanX specifically, you know, like, we have several projects in the list. Um, and I've seen people that are like, we don't need more projects. We need, you know, more utility. We need to be supporting the OG projects. And it's like, that's, again, gray area. And, you know, if you're participating in a project expecting to have 3 more projects supporting it, like, then maybe you're supporting that project for the wrong reasons. You know, like, the project on itself should stand for itself, and you shouldn't have to expect more to be built on it. Um, but obviously, if more is built, then that's great. But
Mhm.
I see a lot of people that are just like, we need to be, you know, I don't know, like, if you're supporting OG projects, then you would need to launch a new project. And so it's not that we don't need more projects.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah.
Uh,
We
yeah, I don't
can't.
know.
Yeah.
But I
It,
guess what I was gonna say also is, like, there's, if it's in, especially if it's in the black and white and it follows those bullet points and it's absolutely a TitanX protocol, like, it follows those things, that ethos. Even those projects that fail are still supporting us. Like, they still brought in a billion TitanX, right? And then flopped. Well, that's a billion TitanX that's no longer on the market. Like,
mhm.
that's still supporting us. So, like, I would never say we don't need more protocols. Like,
Mhm.
that's crazy to me.
Well,
Like,
like imagine now if the bull run we saw with the mining and the frenzy and all that we saw with TitanX in the first like 100 and some odd days, right? Imagine if people did that and there was stuff to do with TitanX afterwards, right? Like, there would have been a frenzy. People would have been like, "Oh my god, I'm in so much profit. I can do leverage this and leverage that, and I can get staking yield over here, and I can do more mining. I can do blah 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 blah." There's so many games to play with your profits. Um, I think that we would have been in a completely different scenario. But now, you know, it takes. If we were to say we don't need any protocols, just support the core. It's like the core was supported initially and grew out to be what it is because we had that initial bull market. Effectively, we had that mass inflow of economic energy, and so, you know, now there's a couple, at least in my mind, there's a few different ways it can go, but the one that speaks to me personally the greatest, which would have the biggest impact for all the tokens, is if 1 or 2 protocols come out and create a buzz to any degree, like we've seen with other protocols that start to bring attention in. Then everything else gets affected, right? It's like, especially because if we look at the space we're talking about the shortest attention span, the most like, I want profit now or I'm out by the majority of people, right? And this isn't for everyone that's listening to this right now. I'm not saying that about everyone, but a lot of people in the space are like that. The majority of communities are profit oriented. They go where the profit is, and where profit's not, they leave. That's why people suck. It's like, this thing's dead. I'm not going to make any profit from it, right? I don't think it's worth my time to stick around here. So to say we don't need anything new is the long, hard grind, of bringing back the glory days, which, you can never really replicate that fully. TitanX was at least I would say it's hard to replicate something like that because TitanX came out of the blue. It was so refreshing. It was so different. You know, it would be hard for something to replicate that. But if you can get one or two protocols that come in that can recreate that, you benefit everything else. Because then people come in and make a ton of profit, and they're like, oh, there's other things they can do auctions, like do stakes, all that stuff. So that's my argument for it anyways. And I don't really see a reason why at this point you wouldn't push if you think you have a protocol that can help to just sit on the sidelines and wait for the grass to get greener, or for everything to get better so that now, oh, okay, we're in it. We're now bullish again. Now it's safe to launch,
Yeah. I mean, to a certain degree, I can understand trying to time the markets.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, yeah, I agree with you that if it's supporting TitanX, like you could be the catalyst. Like, and if you're waiting on the sideline for green candles or for that right time to launch, when all along you could have launched a month ago and kickstarted that wave, like, if you've got something that you think is strong, then yeah, come on with it, right? And the market will react to it. So, but at the same time, I understand launching at the bottom is really beneficial for your protocol, because the second it reverses, your liquidity pools get crazy thick, and you're at this bull market where people are just throwing a dart at any token and they're winning, and like everyone's throwing money around everywhere. Like that happens. So
I want to bring this up while I'm thinking of it here. Google's got a question for you, dude. If you keep launching new protocols and continue to have TitanX as the main LP, though, isn't that inflating the supply by proxy?
No. Like inflating the TitanX supply? Like that? Yeah, I'm going to say no. Do you understand what he's asking?
Because I think what he's saying is, are you creating more, like, I think what he's implying is you are basically inflating the possibility for sell pressure to come back. I would actually say it doesn't really change, because you can't create new value or destroy value. You can only change the scale at which more or less people get to extract that value or use that value when they come out of the system.
Exactly. Like they're only going to be able to extract the amount of TitanX that protocol brought in. If you can't have a protocol that only brought in $100 worth of TitanX and then people are selling out $1 million worth, like that's, so it again, you're taking the good with the bad. Like, yeah, people are with that main LP, when they take profits on a successful protocol, they are going to be selling TitanX on the way out the door to get ETH. But that's okay, because that user had to show up with ETH to buy TitanX to get into the protocol to make money. And it's only affecting the ratio of your protocol to TitanX. And if a bunch of people exit that protocol, then your ratio, basically dies, and then they're not extracting any more TitanX out of that. But it's always a net positive. If there's one TitanX in that LP, then you're a net positive, right? Like you brought in more TitanX than left, because that LP is still sitting there. That's why I think, yeah, even if they're in the gray area, I would welcome 1,000 tokens with 1 foot in the door, like because it's at least one TitanX for every token out there that they're taking out of circulation and putting it in an LP. And yeah, it can get extracted, but no more than what was put into it.
So, well, I'll read this as well. The BOT protocols have done a good job of burning themselves, but still the supply that is left that nobody's doing nothing with kind of becomes an anchor. To me, it sounds like, tell me if I'm wrong here, but to me, it sounds like these questions are a symptom of circular movements of economic energy without new value being injected over time. And this sounds to me like, okay, more of a question of, okay, how do we bring in new users so we're not just, you know, giving new user or existing users basically putting money from one hand into another, essentially, you know? What do you, which I think we've talked a little bit, but to me, that's what this sounds like. Are you kind of sensing the same thing?
Yeah. And I mean, I think, you know, burn, lock, stake, TitanX is kind of part of that, right? If you're doing those things, then you're guaranteed a net positive because those can never come back. I mean, I can understand, yeah, if you're not doing that and you're just creating this massive LP and you get all this attraction, but it can easily come right back out. I get that. But still, like, think about the net positive of all the additional volume that goes through the TitanX ETH pair and that the smart contract is now sucking up, and Titan Farms is getting higher APY because of all that extra volume, and now users are winning there, and it's burning more Tink, and it's like it's very intricate, you know, like it's not black and white when you look at it that way. Like there's lots of things that get affected and just additional volume that supports the ecosystem. I mean, every buy and sell on the TitanX ETH pair like is locking up TitanX because the smart contract owns those fees, and they're I believe they're burning them. They're not releasing them, you know. Like with Helios, it's just re-adding it to the LP, so it's making that LP thicker, but it's all smart contract owned, and like the only way to extract that is if you have HLX. So I don't know. Like again, it's kind of back to the time thing. Like maybe in the short term, maybe it's not that great, but in the long term, I think I would love to see dozens if a new project launched every day. I would love to see it, you know, because not everyone's going to be a winner, but there will be a few that win, and that really helps support us. And even the losers did lock up some. Like that LP is always going to be there. There's always going to be one TitanX sitting in this dead token project that's not going anywhere, right? Like that's helping with the supply.
Well, and as that goes up in value too, I mean, as TitanX, if we assume TitanX is going to go up in value over time, and the supply is going to naturally just deflate by a byproduct of protocols as a proxy for burn, kind of holding on to TitanX via the contracts, or value injection and direct burning of the tokens. You lock up tokens, and those increase in their value towards the ecosystem, because every time, you know, tokens get burned, they get more scarce, the price goes up, it's harder to get it. And so if you have even a bunch of protocols that failed, so to speak, but they lock up like handfuls of thousands of dollars of TitanX, that all adds up in the end. And if no one's able to really extract it, I mean, that all, at least in my mind, it, like you're saying, I think it all ends up positive. Now, that being said, you know, I hope we don't have 100 failed protocols. I really hope we don't. I hope we have 100 highly successful protocols that are all absolutely killing it, and we really focus on quality over quantity. And at the same time, it's DeFi. Anyone can do what the hell they want. I'm never going to say don't do, like, it's going to happen. But, you know, I think if we, which we are, you know, I've seen there's a shift in sentiment that I've noticed from all the founders or more public figures in the community. Is there's a common message that's coming up of, like, you know, whether it's the extreme of we don't need any protocols, focus on the quality ones that are already here, there's a focus back to quality, right? And I feel as though if we can get just quality products over the next little while that come out that add to what's already there, doesn't matter what happens afterwards. You know, I think because we're pivoting, that's what we're going to see. And this next wave that is going to come, I think is going to be fantastic, because people are going to come for one game or two games, and they're going to see there's 3 or 4 or 5. Oh my God, there's all these other ones are coming back to life, because going back all the way to the core of like the LP strategy, if one impacts the whole, right, all the games start popping off. You get the flywheels going. Boom.
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I'm just being extreme, you know, like I'm with you. I don't want to see 1,000 projects fail. I'm just in the extreme case that a bunch showed up and they all failed, it would still be a net positive to the ecosystem. That's not what we want to see, obviously. But
I guess actually there's an argument against that, because if there's 100 failed projects, there's 100 failed projects that have affected users, and there's a lot of potentially bad vibes that have spread around the ecosystem because of that. I would put that out there as an argument. I'd be curious to what you'd say about that.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. But again, this is just like an extreme scenario to push a point.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
What are the odds that the next 100 projects come out that are all flops? Like,
yeah,
I'm gonna say no chance, because I'm gonna be one of those projects.
Exactly. We're both there, so I don't think it's gonna happen.
Yeah. It's just pointing out that, like, I want to be welcoming to anybody and everybody. It's just a matter of tread lightly with, we can't just blindly accept that every one of these is super beneficial to the ecosystem, but maybe in a long enough timeline they are, you know. Like, I really like your point on that. Like, that's something that is just philosophical. Like, I don't even know how to, like, build a simulation on a spreadsheet to define if that is true or not, you know. Like,
maybe the only thing you could do is look at something like ETH and just say, okay, it's liquidity scaled across time, and how many pairs do people not use that are locked up that have $2, $10, $1,000 in liquidity that have no volume but are still just sitting there? Which means if there's, let's say, 20 million, let's say there's $1 million in ETH that's just sitting, that's $1 million that can't be touched, really. You know,
and I bet you it's way more.
It probably is. I wanted to say like 100 million, but I was also scared to say that big of a number because that sounds almost too big. But you know, so I guess you could look at it like that. That's what eventually could happen for something like TitanX, where as it scales and as more projects come out, you know, whether it's failure on the front of it didn't work, people didn't like it, people just moved on. You know, that all does sit there. And I think, you know, this comes to an interesting point of, you know, for future builds, what should standards, or what standards can we also hold ourselves to that are like maybe in the future, like boxes that we need to check? Like, should protocols in the future have some percentage where liquidity is being built? Should they have some percentage of smart contract where, you know, like where you have specific features, so there's a guaranteed volume into the protocol equals captured supply into the liquidity pool to make sure there's not a mass value extraction possible, and that there's a capture? Because a buy and burn is great, it's amazing, but it has a different effect than liquidity over time. Very different effect of putting in liquidity. So I'd pose that question to you and see what your thoughts are.
I don't know. Like, I like that. I think Steve showed me the power of having allocations to liquidity. Like, I'm so jealous when I go to Dex Screener and look at the full list of projects and I sort by liquidity, and it's like TitanX, DragonX, Volt, you know, and I'm like, even like, look at that chart. Oh my God, so far down, but still massive liquidity.
Still, yeah, that's actually nuts to think about. It's come down. How far has it come down now? And the liquidity is still 700K. Let's see. It's like 90 some odd percent, 90, probably 98%.
Yeah.
Which is par for the course of everything in the ecosystem right now. So this is no shade on Volt.
No. But more, yeah, like, that's how much TitanX, like, scroll down on the right. How much TitanX is that? 2.2 trillion. Am I reading that right?
2.29 trillion. Yeah.
In an LP. Like, who could be mad at that? Like,
it's literally holding more TitanX than it is Volt by a factor of almost 3 in terms of economic energy. Take that as alpha if you want. I'll leave that there for those who are willing to interpret what that kind of LP setup could mean.
Yeah.
But
that's impressive. Yeah.
To your point, I mean, yeah, like, you know, Steve really did kind of set a precedent with it. Which is why I adopted the buy and build into my smart contracts as well. Cause it's like,
Yeah.
how could you say anything other than it worked brilliantly, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So I don't
Yeah.
want to, okay, sorry. You were going somewhere with that though, too. So I brought up Volt.
Yeah. So I am incorporating that. Like having an allocation to adding liquidity, I think is amazing. And it's a great idea. And then also the other thing that I'm always very careful about is selling tokens. You know, like there's a lot of tokenomics out there that you would think are great, but then in the back end, it's actually hurting something. Um, like, uh, so in stacks, you know, we are staking Hyper and we are receiving Hyper. Now, with the normal setup, we would be converting that Hyper to TitanX to then, you know, distribute to users. The only way to do that is to sell the Hyper,
Right.
and that hurts the project, and that hurts us because we're staked in it too. So we've got a workaround on that. That doesn't go to payouts. What that does is it buys E280 and then buys stacks and burns it. It just goes straight
Mm.
to that route. Instead of going down, selling down at TitanX, it's going up deeper into the web of buying E280 and then buying and burning stacks. So I think that routing is much more beneficial to, like, it's not hurting the price of Hyper because the price of Hyper is derived from the TitanX Hyper pool. And if we're not selling that ratio down, then we're not hurting it. Now, there's still probably some ARB going on that's maybe something there, but I don't know. Just my point is like being careful not to sell TitanX down to ETH or sell any other bot token down to TitanX. I try to make sure that I'm not doing any of those things.
Mm. Mm-hmm. I think those are, I mean, from a build standpoint, those are the kind of nuances that, you know, can really, really make or break
Mm-hmm.
the longevity and the impact of a protocol. Like something as simple as like where you're routing, how you're routing. So that, I think that's huge. I hope the right person hears that for this. And, you know, I know even for Taurus, like I'm not doing liquidity webs. Taurus doesn't work with liquidity web. It's not designed for that. But those small nuances, I mean, this is the one amazing thing about building in this community and, you know, having, being able to have conversations with, you know, guys like yourself and Utah and Jake and Eric and all these, I mean, all the build, like Mike Dean, everyone in the community has so much experience now. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of nuanced experiential understanding that you can only get by talking to guys like you that have built and built and built. It's like people who are, if you're thinking of building, like really listen to guys like Dude, you know, guys that have built a lot and can give you these pointers. And, you know, I would even say, you know, reach out to these guys and be like, hey, can you help me if you have questions or what? I don't know if you're open to it, but I shouldn't necessarily force your hand on that one, but also maybe not Dude specifically. Don't hammer on Dude, you know, maybe go to James or, you know, decentralize that. But,
Yeah.
it's,
I'm always happy to give my opinion. You know, like I think I'm very careful about, like, because I've had a lot of people that are like, well, I want to build this, but I have no idea what I'm doing. You know, could we collaborate? And I'm like, my plate's full on building. You know,
mhm,
like I can take some time to read through a white paper, you know, and give you my opinion, and I can point you in the direction to devs and auditors and all that stuff. But that's one thing compared to like collaborations and building, because you know I've got the next several months already booked up with stuff in the pipeline, so I just have to be careful about that. And even
mhm,
then, like, it's crazy how little time I have to read somebody's white paper. That sounds easy. You're like, yeah, just take a minute. But like, if you really want to dive into it and understand it and give really good feedback, that takes multiple hours.
mhm,
And then I'm already fighting in real life with my crypto life as it is. Like I'm a workaholic, and my friends and family are always pushing me like, hey man, like there's a real life out here that you need to be experiencing too. And I agree with it. Like I'm trying to really balance that. I'm just so motivated and excited, and I'm loving what I'm doing that I say, yeah, I'm only going to work 8 hours, but then when that 8 hours ends, I'm like, well, but there's this, I could easily just keep going, and I don't hate my job, so I do it. And then, but then I suffer on the back end there. So
Mm-hmm. It's the blessing and the curse, the double-edged sword, because it's like you can get so caught up in it in a good way where it's like it's a creative process. It feels good. You're like, it's like you're getting your hands in the mud, and getting dirty, and you're playing around, you're molding it, you're sculpting into something. But then, like you're saying too, and I've really come to realize this for the first time in years and years and years, because I haven't been this like involved in something in that long. But yeah, it's like you can definitely get caught up to the point where all you're thinking about is this. You're not even thinking about your family, your friends, all like, you should be chilling out, enjoying your evenings, going out with, hanging out with people on the weekends, maybe getting outside, touching grass and trees and nature. But
yes,
instead you're like, what if I miss something on X? Or what if I don't think, what if this one parameter could be different? Or how, like, I'm sure you could go on even deeper than I could, but like the amount of, maybe unnecessary, but necessary feeling, time obsessing over things, can definitely take a toll for sure.
yes. I mean, I definitely go to bed thinking about crypto, and I wake up thinking about crypto.
Yeah.
That's pretty much guaranteed. But this is advice for not just builders, but also users. Same thing. Like you stop looking at the chart. Go put your phone down and go take a walk. That chart will be there when you come back.
Mm-hmm.
So it works on all levels, and it is very important to be in reality and get out of this matrix of crypto. Um, it's very important for your health. I will say that.
How do you, when you're not doing crypto, what's your go-to like de-stressor, or the way you get back to reality and like ground yourself and re-energize?
I mean, first thing, I give my loved one attention. My girl like is so starved for attention because I put so much into this. Like, so that's the immediate thing, is to give her attention and make sure that like I am there, like, because it's really easy to be there and like you could be out with your friends or having dinner. But if you're still thinking about crypto over here, like you're not even engaging, like that's not, so I have to like tell myself, put it down, like forget about it, like it'll be there tomorrow, like be present. Because if you're always thinking in the future, you're not ever enjoying the present, like that's dangerous too, like the present, that's all we have. That's right now is all we have. The future is theoretical. The past is gone. Um, the whole time thing, like that's really piqued my interest. Like I try to do documentaries. I try to like have, like I enjoy stories and fiction, but to a certain level, it's like, is that a waste of time? And so
I resonate with that so much.
like my girl, she's like in the middle of a movie. She's like, I can't help but feel like I'm gonna die one day, and I'm sitting here on a couch watching something that am I gonna care about, 10 years from now? Like, and I'm like, yeah, there is something to be said about entertainment, and relaxing. Um, but I don't know, like I think with the right topics, a documentary is relaxing, but you're still furthering your education.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like the whole time thing is very interesting to me, and furthering that. But brute force relaxation. I don't only touch grass; I smoke grass, and
Nice.
and that helps a lot too. That's like the shortcut to relaxation and moving forward and just getting into chill mode, you know, like, but I love nature. I really like, you know, there's a, you know, I don't know how many acres this is over here, but like there's nature trails that I can literally walk out my door and walk to and go walk through nature and, you know, go walk your dog, just go explore. Like it sounds silly, but like that, getting back to nature and like getting out of this matrix is very, very healthy. For
Mhm.
me, I would assume for everybody, but maybe everyone's different, you know, but yeah.
I hate to be black and white, but you'd have a hard time convincing me that that's actually there anything but that is the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but
I
it's
don't know. I used to like hate on people that would just watch TV. And like I used to be a huge gamer and I would shit on people that are like, they're just sitting there wasting their lives doing watching TV. And it's like, I'm basically doing the same thing. I'm doing interactive TV. I've got a TV with a controller in my hand. You
Mhm.
know, like, am I any different? You
Still
know,
immersed
like,
in an alternate reality to the one you're actually in.
yeah, yeah. So then I've learned to take a step back and maybe stop hating on what other people are doing and judging them and like feeling like you're wasting your life, you know, and just let me just worry about my life and making sure what I'm doing is right for me. You know, you got to put your own oxygen mask on before you can help your neighbor. And that's, I think I've done a really good job at that. And I'm beginning to help the ones around me because I feel like uh, I am getting there. I do have my oxygen mask on. So, yeah, like, I don't know. I think I just kind of went all over the place. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure.
Absolutely. No, it's and
Okay.
I'm having a hard time not extending the stream another hour and 45 minutes to talk about time like you just did
Yeah.
and to go into that route. Well, you know, let's save that for another time. I do got to take
Yeah.
off pretty quick here,
Yeah.
and get ready for a call here. So, I mean, this has been awesome. It's been great to finally chat and
Yes.
especially about the TitanX. I love these conversations where they're philosophical, and I feel like this is the tip of the iceberg for other conversations we can have in the future. So let's make that happen. And for
Yeah.
all of you watching, get excited because we've got what Dude's building, got what I'm building, we got Flare coming, we've got all sorts of protocols coming. This ecosystem is on the brink of its next explosion, and it's only a matter of time. So, dude, thanks for coming on. It's great to stream together. Any final thoughts or comments for all our viewers?
Uh, it's not if, but when.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for being here. Enjoy your weekend, and we will be streaming again together very soon.
Yeah.
See you guys.